That night, the sky above the base was completely silent. No stars, no moon, just a thick blanket of cloud, and somewhere inside it, a sound that did not belong. The low, uneven groan of an aircraft that was already dying. Inside that aircraft were 64 men. 64 soldiers who had survived 3 years on one of the most dangerous borders in the country. 3 years of cold, of fear, of counting days on a calendar scratched into a mud wall. And now, finally, they were 40 kilometers from home. 40 kilometers. That is a 15-minute drive. That is the distance between a soldier and his mother's door. None of them knew that in the next 7 minutes, the people who were supposed to save them would choose not to. This is the story of Flight Falcon-6, a story that was buried in an official file, stamped, sealed, and rewritten. A story that someone, 7 years later, risked everything to bring back into the light. And by the end of this video, you will understand why they tried so hard to hide it. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand where these men were coming from. Post 14, a forward border outpost so remote that supplies reached it once a month, if the weather allowed. In summer, the temperature crossed 50 degrees. In winter, the water froze inside the pipes. No phone signal, no internet. The only link to the outside world was a single military radio and letters that arrived months late. The men stationed there had volunteered for the hardest posting the army had. Among them was Sergeant Bilal, 34, who had a daughter he had seen only twice in her entire life. There was Private Adnan, 19 years old, who had lied and said his village was close to the city, so his widowed mother would not worry. And 62 others, each one carrying a version of the same dream, the day they would finally go home. That day had come. The aircraft sent to bring them back was an old military transport. Call sign, Falcon-6. It had flown this route for over 2 decades. It was tired, but it was reliable. And the man flying it was the safest pair of hands the squadron had. Major Adeel Farooq, 19 years in the air, a pilot so calm that younger officers used to joke his heartbeat probably slowed down in an emergency. He had a wife, 3 children, and a habit of calling every soldier he flew, "my passengers." Never cargo, never troops. My passengers. Beside him sat his co-pilot, just 26 years old, on one of his first operational flights. He was nervous. Adeel was not. As they lifted off from the dust of Post 14, Adeel looked back once at the cabin full of exhausted, smiling men and said on the intercom, "Gentlemen, next stop, home." He believed it. So did they. For the first hour, everything was perfect. The men slept. Some talked quietly about what they would eat first, who they would hold first. The engines hummed the way they had hummed 1,000 times before. The lights of the city appeared on the horizon like a promise. Then, at 11:40 at night, 40 kilometers from the runway, something went wrong. It started as a vibration, a tremor in the airframe that Adeel felt in his hands before any instrument showed it. He scanned the panel. And then the warning came, a hard red light, and a word no pilot ever wants to see at night, over a city, with a full load of people behind him. Engine 1, fire. The left engine had caught fire. Now, here is the truth about a situation like this. It is dangerous, but it is survivable. A trained pilot can fly on the remaining engine. There is a procedure. There is time. But that time is measured in minutes, and every one of those minutes depends on a single thing: getting on the ground as fast as possible. Adeel did exactly what 19 years had trained him to do. He stayed calm. He shut down the burning engine. He turned Falcon-6 straight toward the runway, and he keyed his radio and spoke the words that are supposed to move heaven and earth. "Control, Falcon-6, engine 1 on fire, declaring emergency, request immediate landing, runway 09. In any normal world, on any normal night, The answer to those words is instant. Everything else stops. The runway is cleared. Every other aircraft is pushed aside, because a burning plane full of people gets priority over everything. That is the rule. That night, the rule was broken. To understand why, we have to leave the cockpit and go inside the control tower. The tower that night was quiet. It was almost midnight. Traffic was minimal. On duty was a small team, led by a senior duty officer, a man used to giving orders and used to being obeyed. Working under him was a junior air traffic controller. We will call her Lieutenant Sana. When the Mayday came through, Sana's blood ran cold. She had trained for this exact moment. Her hands moved to the board, and what she saw made the situation simple. The runway was empty. Completely empty. Not a single aircraft on approach. Nothing on the ground. Falcon 6 could have been cleared to land in the time it takes to say the words. She reached for the transmit switch to give the clearance, and her senior officer stopped her. "Hold. Do not clear that aircraft." Sana stared at him. "Sir, they are on fire. The runway is empty." I said hold. Because the duty officer knew something Sana did not, something that was on no public schedule. In 18 minutes, a private aircraft was due to land at this runway. On board was a man whose name, even now, cannot be printed. A man important enough that the protocol around his movement was absolute. The runway and the airspace around it had to be kept clear and clean before his arrival. No traffic, no incidents, no exceptions. A burning military transport streaming smoke across the approach path was, in the cold language of that protocol, an incident. So the order came down, quiet and final. Keep Falcon 6 in the air. Make it wait. And into the radio, instead of the clearance that would have saved 64 lives, went a single bureaucratic word. Falcon 6, hold. Runway occupied. Stand by. Runway occupied. It was a lie. And in the cockpit, Adeel Farooq, who could see with his own eyes that the runway ahead was dark and empty, knew it was a lie. What followed were the 7 longest minutes in that aircraft's history. Adeel called again, calm, professional, but firmer now. Control, Falcon 6. I have an engine fire and 64 souls on board. I need that runway. Now. Stand by. He called a third time. By now the fire was spreading along the wing. The co-pilot beside him had stopped pretending to be calm. His voice shook as he read out the instruments. In the cabin, the men who minutes ago were dreaming of home could smell the smoke. Some began to pray. Sergeant Bilal, the one with the daughter he had seen twice, took out a photograph and held it against his chest. And still, Falcon 6 circled. A burning aircraft, dragging a line of fire across the black sky, going around and around and around. Waiting for permission from men on the ground who had decided that one important passenger's schedule was worth more than 64 lives. Inside the tower, Lieutenant Sana was pleading. This was no longer a chain of command question for her. "Sir, we are going to lose that aircraft. Please, clear them. I will take responsibility. Clear them." The duty officer's answer was the sentence that would, years later, damn him. "The order comes from above. Stay quiet. That is an order." Sana went quiet. She has said in the years since that the silence in that tower is the thing she has never been able to forgive herself for, that she followed an order she knew was wrong. She can still hear the pilot's voice on the radio, getting calmer as the situation got worse. The way brave men get calm when they finally understand that no one is coming to help them. Because by the 7th minute, Adeel Farooq understood exactly that. No one was coming. The clearance was never going to come, so he stopped asking. At 11:47, the second engine began to fail, starved and damaged by the fire that had spread too far. Falcon 6 was running out of altitude, out of power, and out of time. Adeel keyed the radio one final time, and this transmission, this one, survived. It survived because it was recorded, and because 7 years later, it would be played out loud for an entire country to hear. His voice, in that final call, was not panicked. It was not angry. It was the steadiest thing on the whole recording. "Control, Falcon-6, we are coming into land. Permission or no permission. I have 64 men behind me, and I am bringing them home. Farooq out." And he turned that dying aircraft toward the runway he had been circling for 7 minutes. The empty runway, the forbidden runway, and he brought it down. On one failing engine, in the dark, with fire on the wing and no clearance from anyone. It should have been impossible. The approach was too fast, the angle too steep, the aircraft too damaged. But 19 years were in his hands that night. Falcon-6 hit the runway hard, bounced, screamed down the tarmac throwing sparks, and finally ground to a halt. There was fire. There was smoke. Emergency crews, who had been quietly told to stand ready and say nothing, raced out across the tarmac. And out of that burning aircraft, into the cold midnight air, came the survivors. One by one, coughing, stumbling, dragging each other out. Sergeant Bilal, alive, the photograph still in his fist. Private Adnan, alive, 19 years old, going home to his mother after all. 61 of the 64 men on board Falcon-6 walked away that night. Major Adeel Farooq was not one of them. When the fire crews reached the cockpit, they understood what he had done. In those final seconds, he had put the aircraft down in a way that drove the full force of the impact into the nose, into himself, so the men sitting behind him would have a chance. He gave his passengers the one thing the tower refused to give them. He brought them home. He just did not walk in with them. Now, you would think this is where the man becomes a hero. A pilot who saved 61 lives against a direct refusal to help him. A funeral with full honors. A medal. A statue. That is not what happened. The next morning, before the families had even been told, the machine began to move. Not the machine that finds the truth, the machine that hides it. The official incident report was written fast, too fast, and it told a very different story from the one that actually happened. It said the fire was the result of poor maintenance the crew had failed to catch. It said Major Farooq had ignored instructions from the tower. It said he had executed an unauthorized landing that recklessly endangered the aircraft. Pilot error. Those were the two words that would define his memory. Pilot error. The private jet? The VIP whose arrival had frozen a burning aircraft in the sky? He was not in the report. Not one line. It was as if he had never existed, as if the runway really had been occupied by nothing at all. And Lieutenant Sana, the one person in that tower who had begged to clear the flight, when the investigators came, her account did not fit the story they had already decided to tell. So her testimony was left out, buried. And Sana herself was quietly transferred, within weeks, to a tiny administrative post at the far edge of the country, far from any tower, far from any radio, far from anyone who might listen to what she had seen. They did not just bury the truth, they buried the witnesses. For 7 years, that was the official history. A careless pilot, a preventable crash, a hero remembered as a failure. 7 years. And then, one day, a recording appeared. No one has ever officially confirmed who released it, but those who know the story know that a certain officer, no longer young, no longer willing to stay quiet, finally decided she could not carry it any longer. The recording was the raw tower audio from the night of Falcon-6. Every transmission, unedited. And when it was played, the country heard for the first time what had actually happened in those 7 minutes. They heard a pilot calmly declare an emergency. They heard him ask for an empty runway, again and again and again. They heard him refused. And buried in the middle of it, caught on tape, they heard a duty officer say the words the official report had spent 7 years erasing. The order comes from above. Stay quiet. And they heard the last thing Major Adeel Farooq ever said, that he was bringing his men home, with permission or without it. The report called him unauthorized. The tape called everyone else a liar. So this is the question Honor Tales leaves you with tonight. It was never really about a fire, or an engine, or a runway. Those things kill soldiers every year, and we call it tragedy, and we move on. This is about a different question. How does a system decide that 64 lives, 64 men who gave 3 years to the hardest border in the country, are worth less than 18 minutes of one important man's convenience? And when everyone with power chose the schedule over the soldiers, one man in that sky chose the soldiers. He had every reason to wait for permission. Permission is safe. Permission protects you. Following orders is how you keep your career, your pension, your name. He threw all of it away, and he brought 61 men home. The file called him unauthorized. We call it honor. I am going to end the video here because some names deserve to be the last thing you remember. Major Adeel Farooq, Falcon 6, 64 souls. Bring them home.